Yep, okay. Hi. Hi. Okay, so today we are having a look at why Parliament should decide on same-sex marriage. It's by Professor Carolyn Evans, who is the Dean. Do you know what the Dean is? Do you know who that is? Kind of like a house coordinator. If we're talking about like a high school equivalent, they're like the house coordinator of law. So they're in charge of all the law students at Melbourne University. So obviously, super important person, smart, blah, blah. Okay, so already, I don't know what to tell you, except that you have to occasionally look at his butt. Yeah. Obviously, she includes that information to give herself credibility, doesn't she? You wouldn't include that you were, head manager of South Morang, Safeway. You would not need to include that information. That would not give you any credibility. However, if you are, if you are the Dean of Melbourne University's Law Department, then that obviously gives you credibility. Okay, so let's read the article. As Australia faces one of the longest federal election campaigns in recent history, a key issue in the background has been the building momentum to legalise same-sex marriage. So, what is the best mechanism for change? A plebiscite on same-sex marriage will cost at least $180 million in direct costs and may come closer to $500 million in full costs, according to recent reports. This is not in itself an argument against holding one. Every time we are asked to vote, it comes at a cost. But that is hardly an argument against democracy. In this case, however, it is not entirely clear why a plebiscite is considered necessary or appropriate to resolve the issue of same-sex marriage. Is there a legal requirement to hold a plebiscite? One reason that might justify the expense of going directly to the people is that it would be impossible to change the law to allow for same-sex marriage without such a vote. Some years ago, that would have been a plausible argument. At least it would have been possible to say that a vote by the people was necessary to be sure that the Commonwealth has the power to legislate for same-sex marriage. The Commonwealth Parliament only has limited power to pass laws. Under the Australian Constitution, power is divided by the states and the Commonwealth can only pass laws with respect to specific areas set out in the Constitution. Section 51 sets out many of those areas, sometimes called heads of power. Section 51 says that the Commonwealth Government shall have the power to make laws in respect to marriage. Only the single word marriage is used and it is not defined. One question that might be asked is whether the use of the word marriage in the Constitution, which is over 100 years old, could have been intended to include same-sex marriage. Those who drafted the Constitution, however, restricted themselves to a simple, single-worded, and over time the Parliament has fleshed out the details such as the age in which people can marry, the circumstances that allow for divorce, and so forth. But they did not answer the question of whether same-sex marriage was within the definition of marriage for constitutional purposes. If that point had not been clarified, it might have been sensible to have a referendum to change the Constitution to make it clear that the Commonwealth had this power. However, in 2013, the High Court clarified the issue in a case that determined the ACT Marriage Equality Act of 2013, which allowed same-sex marriage was invalid. In its reasoning, the court determined that same-sex marriage was within the definition of the word marriage in the Constitution. There is, therefore, no legal reason to require a vote of the people to clarify this situation. It is clear that the Commonwealth has the power to pass the law allowing for same-sex marriage. But isn't it a good idea to ask the people for their views? The Australian Constitution creates a representative form of government. We vote for parliamentarians to represent us, and those parliamentarians thrash through the details of what laws should be passed, in what terms, and with what trade-offs and consequences. Given the complexity of the modern society, any other system would be untenable. There is, however, an element of direct democracy introduced by our Constitution, which, under Section 128, can only be amended by the majority of voters in a majority of states. Ooh. So, if parliamentarians want to introduce a republic, or change the balance of federal power, or abolish the Senate, or limit the power of the courts, they would first need to seek permission of the Australian people in a referendum. This means that the basic structures of our democracy remain in the hands of the people, but the day-to-day decision-making is delegated to elective representatives. The reason that same-sex marriage vote is being described as a plebiscite and not a referendum is that it does not require a change in the Constitution. All that is needed is a change to the Marriage Act. While the political pressure for parliamentarians to respect the results of the plebiscite is considerable, in legal terms, this is only a very large opinion poll. That is the reason that some parliamentarians say that they would not vote for same-sex marriage whatever the result of the plebiscite. It would not be an inherently bad thing to ask the views of the Australian people about a range of issues. This has not, however, been part of the political culture in Australia. There have only been 3 Commonwealth plebiscites since Federation, 2 about conscription and 1 about changing the Australian anthem. In the recent decades, there have been none. Australian parliaments have never shied away from controversial issues, laws or issues that divided the public, including on religious or moral grounds. On the contrary, Commonwealth and state parliaments have passed laws on everything from terrorism to no-fault divorce to anti-discrimination laws to abortion to capital punishment. In the general community, some people strongly supported legal changes in these areas, some strongly opposed, and many were indifferent. If people felt passionately enough about a matter that they lobbied their local members or held protests or wrote petitions or voted for someone else in the next election, all the usual ways to seek to influence politicians in a representative democracy. Same-sex marriage is very much in this category. In comparison to some issues, same-sex marriage is not even particularly controversial, with a fairly substantial majority of Australians supporting the change in most opinion polls. If there is nothing within our laws or constitution to prevent holding a plebiscite, holding a plebiscite either. If politicians decide that they want to shift their usual burden of making such decisions to ordinary Australians, they can do so. But the question remains, what makes same-sex marriage so special that it should be taken directly to the people rather than voted on in Parliament? Parliamentarians should have the courage of their convictions, whatever those convictions may be, and bring the matter to a vote of the Parliament, rather than trying to delegate their responsibilities to a society where a strong majority have already expressed their support for the change in law. Mic drop. Done. Okay, so it's a pretty dry piece, but there's a very good reason it's so dry. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off my email alerts because nobody needs to hear that, especially me. Okay. So, what's the stance? Let's start off with stance. What's the stance here? Are they pro-postal vote? Are they anti-postal vote? Good. Okay, the stance is definitely anti-postal voting, that we should not have postal voting. Excellent. Okay, so jot that down in your little notes. Okay, going further from that, so if the stance is anti-postal vote, what's the contention then?
The Parliament should decide
Good. The Parliament should make the decision, not the people. Good. Yeah, I would say so. Is there anyone who wants to go a little further? Yep. Sarah?
Plebiscite is not necessary in resolving the issue of the same-sex marriage.
Good.
Same-sex marriage and should be put under the responsibility of the Parliament.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think Jag, where she's kind of just gone the step further, where she's said that it's not necessary, that it's not constitutionally necessary, it's not legally necessary to have a postal vote or a plebiscite. I think that kind of adds a little bit to it. So that's what I would probably put for your contention, is that it's not needed and it shouldn't be put on the people, that it should be down to a Senate vote. Okay, now let's talk about tone, because the tone is a little tricky here. What do we think about tone? Monotone. Yeah, just about. Yeah.
It's kind of neutral in some aspects, but it's like meditative.
Yeah, I would say neutral's a good one. That she does try and sound very neutral, very unbiased. I would say clinical. You know the word clinical? Where it's like clean, it's clinical, it's like not passionate, not anything, that she's like trying to be very like robotic, like you were saying, Jag, very monotonal almost, that, she's trying to sound as neutral as possible, where she's like, I'm just weighing up the facts. These are the facts. Here they are. Here is your information. And that is very persuasive in itself, isn't it? Because you go, well, she's got no dog in this fight. It's not like she's part of the same-sex community that we know of. It's not like that she's kind of like, my brother is suffering. Like, she's not doing any of that stuff. She's not got any emotional ties, that she's just like, here's the facts, we don't need it, so then we shouldn't do it. And why does that give her even more credibility? What's something that even gives that clinical thing even more credibility? Yeah, she dropped figures, but there's something else that I mentioned right at the start. It does, but there's something about her. Good, yeah, it's her role. She's the dean. She's the head of law at Melbourne University, at the best university in Australia. She is the head of law at the best university in Australia. So that gives her real credibility. If she's being clinical and she's like, these are the facts, nobody would know the facts better than this chick. If we wanted legal facts, she's the person we should go to. Okay? So her using that really kind of dispassionate, clinical, cold, kind of emotionless tone works really well in her case. If it was like a normal dude using that voice, it would be nowhere near as effective as it is when she uses it, because you're like, wow, she knows. And if she's just putting on her lawyer hat and weighing it up, then it must be right. Yeah. Okay, so we're good with tone. Let's talk about the arguments. What do you think the arguments are? Let's block arguments. Oh, that is horrendous. I didn't realise. Yeah, wow. That's something. Yeah, I know. All of my videos are shot at great angles, which really was brought home to me when Damon Rudge made like a couple of memes with me, and he just screenshotted me from like videos. And I was like, whoo, thanks, Damon. Whoo, yeah, that's true. It is good that knowing that he watches the videos, but that being said, do I really want like screenshots of those? Not really. Although I have been thinking that I would really like to actually start doing a little bit of Photoshop with like memes and putting people's faces in them, like year 12s. I think that would be really funny.
You've already been doing that.
I have noticed that there has been a very like hands-on approach to people adding them in, but I think the number one person that we have to do is that Keanu one with Travis, where it's like, what do you mean? Writing a draft will make me perform better? And it actually looks like Travis. It actually looks like Travis already. I don't know if even anyone would notice if we changed it from Keanu to Travis. I think it would just be like seamless. Yeah, it would work perfectly. That's my plan. That's my next plan. By the way, Travis was supposed to be here today.
Yes,
That's okay. All right. So let's have a look. What do we think? Arguments. What are we grouping? What do we think? Come on, I'm not doing this alone. Actually, let me pull up the actual article. Ta-da! Okay. Zoom. All right. What do we think? What are the arguments? Now I'm not on the screen. I can itch my ear. A really itchy ear, but I didn't want to be like.
It's still filming.
It's not filming me though, is it?
Yes.
Oh. Oh, that's embarrassing. I thought it was filming that. Oh. I'm going to edit this. I don't know how, but I'm going to find out. Anyway, okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay. The things I do for you guys, you have no idea. You know, my friends know that I film this, and they will watch it and just heckle me about it. Yeah, it's great. It's great. They've started screenshotting photos of me and just making stupid. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. The things I do. Okay. So if my friends are watching this, hi. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So what do you think the first argument is? What's the first argument? Sarah knows? Sarah always knows. That's why we love Sarah. Sarah?
I think that the arguments are grouped by the bolded questions, actually.
Yeah, this is pretty much set out for you. It gives you the argument. So the first one is the legal requirement, that there is no legal requirement. Okay? So then it would be pardon?
Wasn't the first one a financial topic? It's a legal.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's an argument. It's just kind of a discussion. Yeah, because she kind of goes, yeah, but that's not a big deal because it costs us money anyway. Then what would you title the next argument? But isn't it a good idea to ask people if their views?
There are comments.
Chirag? I heard you whisper.
It's not necessary to ask people.
Good, yeah, it's not needed to ask their opinion. Good. You don't need to ask the public's opinion. Yeah. Just where the next bold is. All right. And then, do you reckon there's one more? Where are you starting that one? Oh, yeah. I was talking about that with Ricardo just before, and we were saying, do you think that's big enough to be an argument per se?
It's not just the costs, but
Yeah,
it's
there's
also
mentioned
people
there.
know that people are saying yes to the vote, so why do it? So that's counterproductive as well.
Yeah, okay, so maybe doing one that's
Is that rebellion?
yeah, so that it's counterproductive. Yeah, okay. So our third argument is going to be it's counterproductive.
We can do one on politics.
I was going to say that, but then I thought, no, I think I'd probably put that stuff in where it says you know, people have never had an issue before about that. I was going to put that in with the you don't need to ask public opinion. Yeah, I was going to put that all together.
Also,
Alright.
in the first sentence, it's like election stuff.
Yeah, well, we were going to put that in with the counterproductive stuff. Right. Sound good? So our 3 arguments, just to kind of go over it again, it's really weirding me out that I can't see it being filmed and I know my face is being filmed. Can you see? Oh. I don't like it at all. It makes me really uncomfortable.
Why didn't you just film the screen?
Because we weren't going to do it like that. We were going to do it like on the paper, and I said that I would still film, and so. Well, I was going to do it just on the thing, but then yeah. Anyway, okay. So, ready? So our 3 arguments are thus. We are saying the first argument is that there's no legal requirement. Our second argument is you don't need to ask people's opinion. You know, you don't need to know people's public opinion. And then our third argument is it's actually counterproductive to do this kind of postal vote, plebiscite, whatevs. Make sense? There are our 3. Excellent. Okay, so if they are our 3 arguments, where do you see your persuasive pulls? Where are you being persuasively pulled? What do we think? How about even this phrase at the first paragraph, just at the end of the first paragraph, she says, it's not entirely clear why a plebiscite is considered necessary or appropriate to resolve the issue. Like that kind of like, why are we even having that conversation phrase, don't you think? Like it's got that kind of taint to it that it's kind of like, why would it be necessary or appropriate? You know, there's a little bit of hint of it's not so much sarcasm, but it's kind of like, what do you say? It's kind of like irony where they're like, why is it necessary? Does that make sense? Yeah? No? If you don't feel it, don't use it.
Wait, for which argument?
I would probably use it. Oh gosh, that pen's rubbish. I'd probably use it in that that last one, the counterproductive one. The end of the first paragraph, where he says, "Why is a plebiscite?" She says, "Why is a plebiscite considered necessary or appropriate?" And the reason why I'm putting it in the counterproductive one is that word "appropriate."
Like the second one, like not necessary
In the first
to
paragraph.
ask the opponent.
Yeah, in the first paragraph. At the last sentence, first paragraph.
Oh.
But
Yeah.
doesn't like the argument about the necessity to ask the public.
Well, then she says, I see the necessity, I see that you might think it's necessary to ask the public, but then she says, but it's not necessary. You've never done that before. Like, you've never really cared before about our opinions on social matters. Why now? So she actually rebuts it. And a lot of this article is actually rebuttal, isn't it? Where she kind of produces the idea that the opposition would use, and then she talks about why that's untrue. Yeah? Okay. So, first off, let's talk about this image as well. See, Matt? Let's talk about this image as well, because remember, on the exam, Declan, if we were talking about the exam, you must talk about the image. You really can't score more than a 5 out of 10 if you don't address the images. So, first off, why does she use this image? If FYI, in the real deal, just to pull it up, it is a rainbow banner on Bondi Beach. So,
Representing the majority.
because it says it. Yeah. Why do that? Yep. Why have that picture? Shh.
It's to show how the people already have their strong support towards the
Good. Yeah. So it shows that there's already like strong public support. Shows strong public support. Which she mentions later about how like people have been kind of advocating for this for a while. Public support. I would also say that she puts it in as a visual cue for her contention, because the piece in itself doesn't easily kind of put across, like in the actual, body of the essay, it doesn't easily put across what her opinion is, does it? Like, it's because it's so clinical and cold, it's very hard to kind of work out where she personally stands on this. And I think it's supposed to be a visual cue for her opinion. Does that make sense? Like, because obviously a person who is anti same-sex marriage would not put a whole bunch of rainbow flags on their article, would they?
And she
That would
tries
be-
to establish that early on.
Yeah, she wants to establish early on that she is pro same-sex marriage. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why she puts it there. Yep.
I don't know whether really anything, but like all the people in the photo and the location, that's completely different to Parliament and
Yeah, that out on the street, people feel this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, good one. Yeah. Now, talking about that image, if she puts it there to kind of say, hey, I'm pro same-sex marriage, who do you think this article is for?
people that answer.
Do you think? Do you think someone who is anti same-sex marriage would read a article with a bunch of rainbow flags on it? Good. Yeah, she's preaching to a converted audience. She's preaching to people who are already in agreement about same-sex marriage, that it is a good thing, that same-sex marriage is a good thing. So you would assume her audience is pro same-sex marriage, but perhaps undecided on the postal vote. Whether the postal vote is a good thing or not. Does that make sense? So it would be a pro same-sex marriage audience, but who are unsure about, I guess, the necessariness of a postal vote. Yeah? With me? Give me a weird look. You're just like, I don't know. Anyway. And I shouldn't have done that again on screen, because it's all right for you because you're not being filmed. I'm sure it's not the stupidest face I've pulled on screen, so that's great. All right. So what else we got? Persuasive pulls. What else we got?
She seems to have in the second paragraph under the first heading,
Yeah.
there seems to be like a lot of cause and effect, where she's like
Can
using
you?
how she goes, the Commonwealth only has limited power under the Australian Constitution to define it.
Yeah, she goes into like real specifics about how law works, doesn't she? And I think that is supposed to be persuasive in itself. What is so persuasive about her giving us all this dry nitty-gritty about how constitutional law works?
Makes her sound professional.
Good. It makes her sound like she knows what the hell she's talking about. Yeah, it makes us go, wow, okay, she really gets how constitutional law works. And for the lay people like ourselves, we don't know how constitutional law works. We just live under it. We just kind of accept that it's a thing that we have, but I can't tell you what our Constitution says. I don't know. It's just not something that's ever interested me, so I've never read it. We're not Americans where we like memorize it. And like get real defensive of any amendments. Did you hear, actually, I was listening to this thing about the governor of Texas, who there was another school shooting like a couple of days ago, and he said the reason that school shooting happened was because of video games. It wasn't guns' fault, it was video games' fault. And Fortnite got a mention, PS, so, good for it,
Even though like, Australia has the same.
Yeah, we have video games, we just don't have guns. And then we've solved it by not killing each other with them. Americans.
Doesn't Texas like to separate itself from America? Like they like to. It's like
Texas is very conservative South. Yeah.
Because like America's like sort of like there's some states that like say I'm not from America, I'm from Texas, or I'm from.
Yeah, because they have like some people feel like we're part of the South. Yeah. Anyway, we've gone off topic. So let's continue. Persuasive pulls. So we said, ladies, gents, we said that there was a persuasive pull in the fact that she was giving all this nitty-gritty about constitutional law, that it made her sound very professional. And I think it gives validity to her argument, doesn't it? It makes her argument seem very valid, like that it's not based on an emotional response or emotional kind of opinion, that it is actually based on constitutional law. It's based on fact rather than, well, this is my opinion. I think it hurts people's feelings. It's not about that. It's about law. Okay? And that would be particularly persuasive to who? Who would find that particularly persuasive? Politicians would find it particularly persuasive, yep. Anybody else that you kind of go, they would find that particularly persuasive? Probably somebody who is actually on the kind of border. If you're on the borderline and you're like, I don't know, postal vote, I guess it's okay, but, if you're feeling that way, if someone gives you a fact, you go, I can't argue with that, don't you? So it would be particularly persuasive to people who are kind of on that borderline, who are not really sure how they feel about postal voting. They know how they feel about same-sex marriage, they just don't know how they feel about postal vote. All right, anything else there that you see in that argument that is persuasive? Yep.
The fact that at the very start that sort of bottom bit, impossible, is like it just feels like a strong word that she uses.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
At the very bottom.
At the very bottom of the first page?
Like the start of that last paragraph.
Impossible. Yes. Okay. Where she says, I keep calling her a he. That's poor by me. So it's the second sentence. It's the second sentence under the second line under the heading, is there a legal requirement? And she says, it would be impossible to change the law. And that word impossible is an incredibly strong word, because we go, well, they have no choice. There is no choice in this, that they can't do it. Even if they wanted to, they can't, it's impossible for them to do it.
But then you rebutted it later. It is that the whole
She, well, that's okay. I keep doing it too. I think what she's doing there is actually saying, this is what the opposition say. They say it's impossible, and then she proves how it's possible. And goes, well, you don't need it. There's no legal requirement for it. So she actually proves that they're wrong. That they're saying something is impossible when actually it's not only possible, that's the law. Yep.
They also highlight the word 500 million.
Yeah. But then she kind of rebuts herself with that and goes, but that kind of money isn't that big a deal anyway. So,
Why is that
PowerPoint. PowerPoint. PPT.
Oh, it's the opposite for us.
Oh, it's the opposite for you guys because mirror being the internet. Anyway,
You say like by the mention of the opposition's argument, she's sort of like trying to contrast the strength of her argument with theirs,
Good one.
And
Yeah.
consolidating her own in a way.
So Ricardo just said something smart, and that's a miracle. So we need to listen. That's not true. Ricardo says smart stuff all the time, but I just thought it was funny to say. So he just said that the reason that she actually gives the opposition's argument before she rebuts it actually helps her argument further, doesn't it? It makes us go, oh, well, their argument is redundant, that it's, it's not very strong if she can so clearly kind of eviscerate it, that she can kind of pull it apart. That she gives their argument in like simple kind of terms and then just like tears it apart. So even that fact that she kind of presents the argument and then rebuts it in such a clear and kind of detailed way using facts is obviously very, very persuasive. Andrew, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was going to say which argument it fits into.
The pulling apart the argument bit?
Yeah, this is would be impossible to change the law.
I would probably put that in the legal requirement one. That her opposition say that it... Yeah, I'd put it in that one. Let's have a look at the next one. But isn't it a good idea that we don't need to ask people their opinions? What one could we use for that?
We vote for parliamentarians to represent us.
Good.
We're just supporting them rather than ourselves.
Where is that?
At the very start, under that subheading.
Oh, yep. So second sentence, end of the first line, second sentence. We vote for parliamentarians to represent us, and those parliamentarians thrash through the details of what laws should be passed, in what terms, with what trade-offs and consequences. Okay. Why is that persuasive? What's persuasive about that statement?
Well, it uses the inclusive language at the start, so it includes the audience.
Yeah, that it's like we've already done something to kind of negate this problem. Yeah?
And it's just like we're just giving it to them make their own decision. So there's no point in us.
Yeah. I think it's kind of similar to when she was presenting us with facts earlier, that she presents us with the kind of objective statement that it's like we vote in parliamentarians so they make decisions and thrash out the details. That is their job. She presents us with this like objective statement that actually encourages us to think, yeah, so why are they asking us? Do you know what I mean? Like that objective statement makes the reader then go, yeah, she's right. So then why the hell are they asking us? We vote them in so that they make decisions. So we don't have to make decisions. So why the hell are they asking us? Does that make sense? Yeah? That's that effect on the audience. The intended effect on the audience is to make them think, yes, that statement is true. So then why are we having this conversation? Yeah, which obviously strengthens her overall argument that we don't need a vote. Excellent pickup. Another one? Oh, I've got one where she says it's under the poster. It's the second paragraph after the poster, where she says, it would not be an inherently bad thing to ask the views of the Australian people about a range of issues. This has not, however, been a part of the political culture in Australia. There have only been 3 Commonwealth plebiscites since Federation, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And then she says, 1 is about, 2 about conscription. Do you guys know what conscription is? Where you force people to go to war. Yeah. So 2 of them have been about conscription, and both times they didn't go through, and we didn't force anyone to go and fight. And then the third one was about changing the anthem. Okay, so why does she present us that? What does that attempt to make me think?
Even though we are saying something, it's not really leading to anything.
Yeah, but why does she tell us that, like, we've done this before, but only 3 times, and these are the times? Why tell us that?
Makes it seem outdated.
Yeah, it makes it seem like a very outdated concept. Concept? Yeah, concept. I just pronounced it really weirdly. Might have just had a mild stroke, just I just forgot how to talk. So yeah, she's trying to show us that it's a very outdated concept, that it's not something that we've done in any recent times, because obviously, since war, that's a long time ago. We haven't had a war for a good while. Well, one that we've had conscription for. Oh, who knows? Yeah. Well, I mean, we still haven't sorted out what's going on in North Korea, so,
I think she even references it earlier when
yeah, she says it hasn't done for decades, kind of thing.
given the complexity of modern society, any other system would be untenable.
Yeah. So yeah, I think she presents it to kind of say, this is something we haven't done for a while, but I think she also says it because those comparison points, going to war, forcing our children to go to war, and changing our national anthem, one of the things that our whole country stands for, they're big deals, aren't they? If we're going to if we're going to force all our children to go to war, I would like to have a bit of a say about whether my children go to war or not. That would be something I would like to have my say. I don't want the politicians to just make their own decisions. I want to say something. Same with, the national anthem. That's something that, we're supposed to stand for and basically fight for. I want to have my say. Do I feel that the same-sex marriage is kind of up there with potential killing of my child? No, not really. And so that's what she's doing. She's creating this comparison point to kind of go, no, these are not the same kind of issue. That we do this when the issue is of kind of prominent importance, but this is not an issue of prominent importance. It's not going to change our lives. Does that make sense? And then she goes further by saying, the Australian parliaments have never shied away from controversial issues or controversial laws or issues that divided the public. On the contrary, the Commonwealth and state parliaments have passed laws on everything from terrorism to no-fault divorce to anti-discrimination laws to abortion to capital punishment. Why give us all of those comparisons? What's the point of that? What is that intending to make me think?
Bigger issues have been passed without websites.
Good. Bigger issues have been dealt with, bigger and more controversial issues have been passed without plebiscites, so why would same-sex marriage be any different? Why are we not kind of putting same-sex marriage in that category rather than the category of conscription? It seems absurd. Does that make sense? And so she's creating these comparison points to go, yeah, well, if they've made controversial issues before, why aren't they doing it now? It's prompting us to kind of think that it seems absurd.
I think it's also supported by when she says on the next page, fourth line, in comparison to some other issues, same-sex marriage is really controversial.
Oh, yeah. So, third page, fourth line. In comparison to some issues, same-sex marriage isn't even particularly controversial, with a fairly substantial majority of Australians supporting the change in most opinion polls. So that one goes with our third argument, particularly, where we're saying it's counterproductive. And I think that works really well. So how does that kind of, I guess, what does that prompt me to think? Sorry, do you know are you lost? Okay. Third page, fourth line. Halfway through the line it says, in comparison to some issues, the same-sex marriage is not even... Pardon?
It's the 4th page.
4th page, sorry. I'm just a bad counter. Everybody knows this about me though, so no one's surprised. It appalls Ricardo, but he's dealing with it. In comparison to some issues, same-sex marriage is not even particularly controversial, with a fairly substantial majority of Australians supporting the change in most opinion polls. What does that attempt to make me think? Why does she give me that information?
But the public's views already been expressed.
Good, that the public has already had their say, they've already given their approval of it, and so to do another vote is not just stupid and pointless, but it's counterproductive. Like, we've already done that. Why are we going backwards and doing it again? You know, just to have it kind of on the record, that seems counterproductive. Yep.
Is it also suggesting that there's other stuff to look at?
Yeah, there's better things to do, and I think she does kind of highlight that later. Oh, here's another good one for the third argument. Parliamentarians should have the courage of their convictions and bring the matter to a vote rather than trying to delegate their responsibilities. What is that attempting to make me think? What does she want me to think about postal voting? About the concept of getting us to go to a postal vote? Yep.
That it's manipulated on politicians' part to actually push their point to the people.
Good, yeah, that it's manipulative of the parliamentarians, that they're trying to avoid their responsibilities. And also that it lacks courage, that they're cowardly for doing this. You know, where she says, you know, parliamentarians should have the courage, which she's saying, you know, because they're pushing postal votes, they're not courageous, that they're cowardly for doing this, that they're doing it because they're cowardly. They're not doing it because of some kind of greater good. They're doing it because they're bound to it. They're doing it because they're cowards. Cool. Any other persuasive techniques we want to mention that we like? This one is a really tricky one to find persuasive techniques in, isn't it? Just because of the tone. Because it's so clinical, it's almost, you miss the persuasive techniques because it is like there's no passion. Does that make sense? So you've got to read really carefully and notice that lack of passion is actually persuasive in itself. You know, by giving us lack of passion, that actually persuades us. Cool. Anything else you want to add? Joshua? How you doing? You all right? Well, it is 4:30. Time flies when you're having fun. Did we want to pack up or do you want to keep going? You good? There's one more? Oh, okay, cool, yeah.
On the line that's above the post that says the reason that the same-sex marriage vote is being described as a plebiscite and not referendum is that it does not require a change to the constitution.
All that is needed is a marriage act. Yeah, definitely. I'd probably put that in the first argument. Yeah, don't you? Because it's kind of talking about like legal requirements again. Yeah. Oh well. How are we feeling about the sack? Not too bad. The ways to get around that is to condense the arguments, to kind of go, okay, well maybe I'll address 2 arguments in the same paragraph and just do one technique for each. And don't try and do too many techniques. It's about quality of analysis, not quantity. We don't expect that you're going to be able to do every technique. Try and do maybe 2 for each argument rather than 4, 5, whatever. You're not going to be able to cover that kind of detail. Well, Jag, you might actually find that maybe your first article, you do 2 techniques for each, and then you might get to your third and you're like, I can only address 1 now. That's fine, okay? We know the time. We know what it's like. Yeah.
So it's like there's 23 articles to look at.
you're saying.
Fu, you know that. One big, two small.
Oh, probably.
Hi.
The big one gonna be almost as big as you record everything.
I did. But like, and I didn't realise. Oh god, I'm still recording. Get in it.
Hi.
Isn't that cute? Alright. No, I didn't.
See, miss.
See ya.
Touchscreen works. We're doing this?
I can't. Yeah, I don't know if it.
It does work.
Does it work?
Infrared apparently.
Yes.